The mystery of Atlantis, as described by the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce. He says that the destruction of Atlantis took place in three stages, which were far apart in time. That also coincides with what is written in the Emerald Tablets by Thoth the Atlantean. Thoth the Atlantean he was also known as Hermes Trismegistus of the ancient Greeks. He says that Atlantis was very advanced in technology. They were also using their technology to the detriment of humans, he said, and it was only about time. It was about time that a matter of time before the divine spirit put an end to them because of what they were doing to God's creation on earth. And the Atlanteans knew that this was going to happen, their destruction. Some of them did go to various other places of the world and set up new cities. The first things they used to do, they would do is set up pyramids. Now, the creation of the planet, for Atlantis, the continents described by Plato, and which, according to the legend, was broken into pieces, some due to the ultra-technological application of its inhabitants at the time, as it was used in a thoughtless way. In other words, they did something, they misused their technology, which caused the sinking. Edgar Cayce was able to provide us with relevant evidence based on the information he collected from 650 people's lifetimes over a period of 20 years. In this rather long period of time, all the information he received presented an absolute consistency regarding the dates and events concerning some period of Atlantean history throughout the relevant retrospections, quote unquote. They were made with a large time difference or one from the other. The scholars of this information from the flashbacks made by Cayce placed the first stage of the destruction the year 50,000 BC. At that time, Atlantis was a single continent, and the seismic activity was much weaker than during the second and third stages of the destruction. The second stage is placed in the year 28,000 BC, and the seismic activity was of such intensity that it split Atlantis into 5 large islands. The third and final stage is placed around 10,000 BC, where the total destruction and disappearance of Atlantis took place. Cayce, referring to the first chapter of Genesis, says that life on our planet followed its evolutionary process from before the arrival of man. The first appearance of man was probably in an immaterial state, that is, as a soul. These souls, freed from the limitations of material form, had the ability to enter into other life forms, according to Cayce. That is, they could settle in a plant, tree, trunk, or an animal body in order to get the experience of creation. But the fact that they were only spiritual entities without physical senses prevented them from getting the experiences they wanted. In Cayce's account, we find that all 5 races of men appeared simultaneously on Earth, and this is justified because the number 5 represents the 5 qualities through which the ability to perceive what is happening in the external world and in the human mind and spiritual consciousness is bridged. The processes of the creation of Homo sapiens are enough to present other evidence in order to prove it. Atlantis was inhabited by the red race. These people developed at a much faster rate than the rest of the races, he claims. The souls that inhabited the Atlantean earth had a greater ability to learn the secret powers. Cayce describes them as follows. They were rather a nature of the nature of thought forms, capable of being formed with the help of thought whenever they wished to acquire a material body. Their structure changed, solidified, and became almost like the present body of man. But with the incessant and reckless materialization of these souls, they began to lose their qualities and consequently gradually become trapped in a physical form. It was then that the separation of the sexes took place because, according to Cayce, the spirit is male and female at the same time. Hence, it contains both male and female qualities. The separation of the two sexes that took place at the time, combined with the possibility of souls entering animals, resulted in the production of some strange creatures, something between humans and animals without clear gender characteristics. Soon, however, intense disagreements arose over the nature of these things, quote unquote, as they were called. Thus, a schism was caused by the inhabitants of the continent of Atlantis, who were divided into two major factions, the Sons of the Law of One and the Sons of Belial. The struggle that broke out between these two factions continued throughout the periods of destruction of Atlantis. The final destruction was a result of the activities of the Sons of Belial, who, with their insatiable desire for knowledge and power, exceeded the permissible limits that not only in the end destroyed themselves, but also destroyed the rest. And thus we see, with souls entering physical bodies and continuing to have knowledge of their hidden powers of the planet, they began to become subjects of its law. But by using these occult powers, they managed to block the regulated evolutionary course of the planet. Now blinded by their power, selfishness, and knowledge, they were completely cut off from their spiritual nature and their creator. Those souls that remained pure were the G of the Law of One, who, seeing the deception of the Sons of Belial, sought to make them perceive the divine nature again and regain their spiritual heritage. But the Sons of Belial continued to stain their history, even though they were far more nimble and capable than other races of the planet. The technological achievements of Atlantis, in addition to his interpretation of the creation of the physical body, Cayce also laid the foundations for the theory of reincarnation. At the same time, he also gave the general picture of the historical development of the civilization of Atlantis. Of course, Cayce's information upsets all those who claim that we are descendants of the intellect that starts from the Stone Age. According to this information, 50,000 years ago, the Atlanteans possessed advanced means of communication, flying machines, and radioactivity. The electrical forces of nature, as he calls them in his flashbacks, had been tamed, and the natural gases of the Earth's interior were being widely used. As these powers were developed for mainly destructive purposes, and this is precisely what caused the first destruction of Atlantis, he says. The disturbance of the balance of Earth's gases and the bad use of natural electricity caused volcanic eruptions, which were, however, milder than those that followed later. From the time of let's remember that the North Island, the Taupo volcano, the supervolcano of the North Island, New Zealand, did erupt around 28,000 BC, which is an almost extinction level event for the Earth. And anthropologists claim that only 2,000 individuals, humans, had remained alive after that destruction. Now, from the time of the first destruction, the population of Atlantis was already divided into two factions, he says. The Sons of Belial toiled only for their own satisfaction, for the use of material goods for themselves alone, without caring for the stocks of these goods nor for the plight of others. They were people without moral barriers, as we would say today. From the dictation given on May 23, 1938, we learn that the other faction, hence the children of the Law of One, believed that the soul was given by the Creator or entered from internal sources in a projection of the mental and spiritual ego in the particular periods. This was the great rule of the Law of One, rejected by the Sons of Belial. This almost allegorical separation of beliefs caused a dichotomy over the application of certain natural laws. Those who practice the occult sciences today consider both spiritual and physical laws to be neutral. Their positive or negative value depends on their use. A typical example is the splitting of the atom, the enormous power of which can have destructive effects as well as great benefits if used for peaceful purposes. The Atlanteans found themselves in exactly such a position, having to decide whether they would give a positive or negative value to the energy source that they had the ability to use. The period leading up from the first disaster was characterized by a sharp contrast between the two opposing philosophies concerning the nature and substance of things. And while the Sons of Belial had enslaved those unfortunate creatures and turned them almost into robots in their desires, the children of the Law One believed that these beings were not objects but trapped souls that contained the divine spark of their Creator, so their desire was to help in their redemption. This difference of opinion prevailed until the final disaster. After the first eruptions and the geological changes that followed them, the war between the two opposing factions continued, but at the same time, great technological progress was made. The Atlanteans made some great inventions such as the death ray, the supercosmic ray, etc. Cayce, in his interview made February 21st, 1933, referred to this ray and then added that it would be rediscovered by us after 25 years. Indeed, in 1958, the laser beam was discovered. As is known, laser beams require the concentration of energy in small crystals. Scholars of Atlantis flashbacks believe that this is not unrelated to the famous crystal used by the sons of Belial to power their continent. According to Cayce, the technological achievements of Atlantis exceeded those that characterize Western civilization of the past 50 years. The Atlanteans possessed atomic energy, television, and a multitude of chemical and mechanical means of daily use, but the greatest achievement may have been in the field of transport and communication. We know that in the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean, he claims they had interstellar travel. Cayce in his flashbacks describes the amazing way in which these people could fly in various types of craft. He also made some hints. One, for some transportation that was done without the use of crafts. Two, for the ability of the Atlanteans to travel through forms of matter denser than air. Three, for ability to transmit thought through ether. Unfortunately, however, the forces of nature, tamed by the will, that of man, began to be used destructively. Thus, the second catastrophe did not take long to arrive, during which there are indications that the shift in the Earth's axis of rotation also occurred. Cayce places this era in time at the end of the dinosaurs, where he associated their disappearance with the use of death rays, which were just invented, used to cleanse the earth of these monsters. The second disaster resulted in Atlantis breaking up into 5 large islands, the largest being Poseidon. Then a part of the population began to emigrate, while the greater part remained stoically submitted to their fate. Nevertheless, the battle for things continued unabated. Many of these creatures had acquired physical deformities such as fin protrusions, webbed feet, and other animal characteristics. The genetic material. Another feature of the advanced Atlantean civilization was that the sons of Belial had discovered the control of the human brain, had broken the genetic code, and had succeeded in shaping the principles of heredity at will. Such, however, apart from any ethical use of this knowledge, could only result in the creation of even more things, that is, Nephilim. Some researchers even argue that the pig was a creation of Atlantis with man as a basic structural material. It should be noted that pig meat is very similar to human meat, and we're reminded of the Jewish ban on pork, and some with the myth of Cayce, who turned people into Circe, the ancient Greek witch of the time of Ulysses, who turned people into pigs. Such an idea about genetics, of course, seems far-fetched, but let's not forget that internationally prestigious magazines such as Life and Time have reported several times that modern scientists have almost achieved a genetic control that is not far away from all these. There is a report from the University of Choinkonsta that synthetic DNA can now be produced in the laboratory. In Atlantis, heredity proved to be too great, an encroachment on the creative forces, as Cayce used to call them. The hideous breed of hybrids and Nephilim to be exterminated. The sons of Belial had so often offended nature itself that in the end it was their own power that destroyed them. And again, this goes exactly with what is written in the Emerald Tablets, and I do have a playlist of them in my playlists, written by Thoth the Atlantean. He claims that they were using their tremendously advanced technology to the detriment of mankind. Now, like the first and second, the third catastrophe had its omens, which were none other than earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The children of the Law of One alienated them, and several groups migrated to the Pyrenees, Egypt, Yucatan, and modern-day Peru. Elements on the history of Atlantis. According to Cayce, the evidence for the history of Atlantis exists in three places. One is the temple in Yucatan and has already been discovered. The other is in the Hall of Inscriptions and in an undiscovered Egyptian pyramid, but prophesied to be found towards the end of our century. And the third is submerged with Atlantis in the Iltar Temple of Poseidon, which will be found when Atlantis re-emerges. Recently, archaeological findings come to support the possibility of such an event. A sunken ancient temple has been discovered off the coast of Bilkney in the Caribbean. The area is where Cayce had placed Iltar's temple. At the time of the pre-destructive earthquakes, this temple had not yet been submerged, and that is why the archives were placed inside it. A large part of them covers the history of Atlantis during the time when the transformation of souls from spirit to flesh took place. Most of Cayce's flashbacks describe life during the time period of the third and final catastrophe, as well as the aftermath. Much of the information concerning this period comes from the life histories concerning ancient Egypt. Egypt was the colony where the majority of Atlanteans immigrated, and another very important work of the Atlanteans before their culture was assimilated by the Egyptians was the treatment of things. It was held in two temples, one called the Temple of Sacrifice and the other the Temple of Beauty. In the first, the physical repair took place, and in the second, the purification of the spirit and its cultivation. The process of physical therapy, the characteristics of the animal were removed from the body. The Atlanteans had discovered the healing properties of colors and music. They also used the art of massage because they believed that proper physical therapy could enhance the body's own healing powers. To remove the deformed features, they used electrical devices. The sons of the Law of One did not fulfill their obligation to things merely by refinement. As spirits, they knew that their true purpose was to rekindle the fire of the divine spark within these souls, because a beautiful body does not mean a beautiful personality. The Atlanteans had realized this, and in the Temple of Beauty of the Soul, they worked for the awakening of the soul, with the aim of understanding the spiritual heritage and training it in the arts. Cayce also stated that the majority of the American population has lived past lives on the continent of Atlantis, making an extension of this point of view. We would say that perhaps America itself is a reincarnation of Atlantis. What's important, though, is that we developed civilization to the same critical point as the Atlanteans. We possess power which can be for good of the earth and its inhabitants, or for their evil and destruction. Perhaps then we are approaching the critical time of the decision. All the necessary cards have been dealt for the game. We have broken the atom. We have altered the natural evolution of our planet with infections. We have understood the genetic code. We have created powerful destructive agents that can destroy every form of life on our planet. And now, what will be the final decision for our own history? Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.